Well, this is a night bill for me and you, Austin. We usually don't record at night, so we got a night game. And I'd like to welcome all of our guests to Awaken Kingdom Culture, where hearts and minds come alive one story at a time. My name is Ken Karcher, and I'll be your host, and alongside me is my son, Austin Karcher, your co-host. Well, over the last 3 weeks, Austin, we've had some interesting stories. And it has been, as we've said, from day one in January, it's been one heck of a ride to this point, and I'm looking forward to what's in the future as well. But we told the story of Diallo Burks, Nick Mangione, and Team Carr. What were your thoughts?
I probably say the same thing every time, but for me, it's just overwhelmed at, how many people are out there. And they all have a story, and each one of them have great moments and difficult moments in their journey, and just seeing the same God that we love and that we serve show up in each of their lives. And then you just see little pictures of him in different ways. And I don't know, I'm just really excited. I step back and I'm amazed that we're doing this, Dad. Just the people's lives that we've been invited into, and obviously we're the most blessed people out of all of them, because we get to interact and get to see the hearts of these people, which is ultimately people that are created in His image. You get to see little pieces of Him, and it's special.
I love the word you used, invited in, because that's so true. They've invited us into something special that not everyone gets to hear, and that's why I'm glad we get to share it. When I look at our 3 past guests, the word that comes to mind is non-traditional. I think of the path that each one of them took. Diallo Burks to the pros was non-traditional. And a long wait. Nick Mangione, never being a high school coach or junior high coach, let alone a major college coach. And then just the path of the Carrs, John and Roger. I think of Roger not playing high school football and going to be a first-round draft pick in the pros. That just doesn't happen.
Yeah. And
then I'm also amazed at the tapestry, as we always talk about. But I like to reiterate that because I think people need to be reminded that that person you encounter today, don't take it for granted. You just don't know when that relationship will show up again. I think of Diallo, I coached. Nick Mangione, through a friend that I work for, connected us. And then John Carr helped you get a job. Roger Carr, I tried to hire when I was at Liberty. So, I'm just, like you said, it's really an amazing opportunity that you and I have to be able to be invited. I love that word, invited into their story. So, well, tonight we go back to what we've been trying to share from our heart for weeks. We took that 7-episode journey through what does it look like to be a kingdom coach and that whole process. And we continue to discuss that on air and in our day-to-day lives. Then we took 4 episodes. We're on the 3rd one. And we talked about the coach approach and just understanding the current state of a person's heart, whether it be our own or one we encounter. And how do we approach those hearts in our day-to-day life? And do we allow the seed, which is that word that we'll talk about again tonight, do we allow it to penetrate and take root into people's hearts and our hearts? We're going to use Jesus' parable of the sower, which is very familiar to most people, but I know I didn't dwell on it like we're doing right now, and there's so much richness in there. And so I'm just going to read the one verse that we're going to talk on tonight from Luke 8. In all 3, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, they record this story. But in Luke 8, it says to the 3rd soil, it says the word of God, it says the seed that fell into the weeds represents the hearts of those who hear the word of God, but their growth is quickly choked off by their own anxious cares, the riches of the world, and the fleeting pleasures of life. And I think all of us, if we're honest, have been somewhat challenged or have encountered those issues. And I want to just go back, which I didn't read, but prior to that statement, as Jesus is describing this parable, when asked the true meaning, he said, "You have been given a teachable heart to perceive the secret, hidden mysteries of God's kingdom. But those who do not have a listening heart," which is the key, my words are merely stories. So we're going to approach this tonight, you and I, with not only a teachable heart that we've been given, but one that is a listening heart. 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 16 and 18, I thought this was a great verse as a lead-in, just to remind us. It says, "But the moment one turns, or returns is the way it really is in the Greek, to the Lord with an open heart." So we're talking about a teachable heart, a listening heart, an open heart. "The veil is lifted and they see now." The Lord I'm referring to is the Holy Spirit. And wherever he is Lord, there is freedom. So we're looking at this open heart, the lifting of the veil so we can see and we can live in freedom. We can draw close to him with the veil removed from our faces. And with no veil, we can all become like mirrors who reflect the glory of the Lord Jesus. We are being transformed into his very image as we move from one brighter level of glory to another. And this glorious transformation comes from the Lord, who is the Spirit. So we see the role of the Spirit, the connector in all of this. And this will be key in helping us understand as we walk through this third soil. So some of the words that jumped out as I turn it over to you is just, weeds and thorny bushes. He talks about the seed gets choked out, takes our breath away. It's like stealing the water and the nutrients. That's the picture of the third soil.
The seed is the seed is, the gift from God, and it's given to our hearts. In his parable, he talks about it being the soil. The soil, like we've said a number of times, really represents our heart or another person's heart. And that seed is what God is trying to implant into us. And, as that seed penetrates and then, begins to take over our lives, which is our heart, what you end up seeing is that it turns into this, this beautiful plant, and, I always think of the quote that you like to use from your friend, Dad, when the ways of your being match, what is it, Dad? Matches the truth of your being, right?
Yeah. When the truth of your being matches the ways of your being, wholeness. Yep.
And that's really what the kingdom is. It's when the kingdom, that seed that comes into your heart, and it takes over, and those roots start to, take root in you, right? And what ends up happening is that transformation of your mind, and your heart ends up just coming out of you. And that's that plant. And as we think about that, and we think about the parable we just talked about, what's sad is that plant gets choked. What's coming out of us is, we're starting to see some fruits. We're starting to see some beautiful things that are happening inside of us. But the plant isn't able to survive because of a multiple list of things. And I think, Jesus describes, different things that chokes our plant, the first thing being, weeds and thorns,
When I hear you talk about, this growth that happens from a seed to a plant, the word I like to also use along with growth is that awakening. It's this awakening for us as humans to the kingdom truths. And that growth we always talk about is really a discovery. Growth isn't a destination. It's something that is a discovery of these truths. And that's really our role too. Part of our ministry is to encourage and empower people as they awaken to these kingdom truths so they don't have to be choked out by the weeds and the thorns.
Yeah. Those weeds and thorns are the things that surround us. They're the things that, are kind of the environment that we live in,
Yeah, Mom and I were talking about that the other day. We're driving down the road because we knew we were going to be talking about this. And like Mom said, she said, even a good garden has weeds.
Yeah.
And so you're going to have to tend to the garden all the time. And in this picture, it's allowing Papa to reveal to us those weeds and thorns that are in our lives that are holding us back and allowing him to do his work, right? He says in Ephesians, we are his workmanship created in Christ Jesus for good works. Before time ever began, he knew those things. And so that's, the farmer, which I'm not, but is going to tend to the garden your whole life.
Yeah. You think about the Bible and just, some examples that come out of this that, demonstrate some of the weeds and thorns that show up in our lives. You think about the Israelites, they just literally come out of Egypt and they watch him do all these plagues to help them, or free them from the bondage in which they lived in under the Egyptians. But as they walk across the Red Sea and then go into the desert, they're constantly challenged and they begin to complain. And what are they complaining about? What they're complaining about are those weeds and those thorns that are surrounding them that are real life things that we all struggle with. I mean, they complained about food. They complained about water. They complained about their leadership. They complained about, why aren't we entering into the promised land? Or we can't enter into them. They're going to defeat us. So they're saying, I want to return back to Egypt, back to the bondage. They also said, hey, we don't like this manna. We want some other food. After they already complained about not having food. So there's obviously, these are real people that just experience these amazing things, but they're just like us. I mean, they're working through these weeds and thorns that surround us that are trying to help us or to keep us from experiencing that kingdom or the life or that promised land that God had for us and has for us.
I looked at the example of Habakkuk, which is not a book I read a lot, but when I was looking at some example ideas, and I thought, this is about as good as it's going to get, because as much as I hate to admit, all three of these statements have come out of my mouth once or twice in my 61 years. Habakkuk questions God, where are you? You just got done saying the Israelites. That's really what they were saying too. Where are you, God? And then God gets blamed. God, why are you doing this to us? Think about how many times we've heard that on a daily basis. Just turn on the TV. And then that question of, why not me? These are all, like you said, real life questions that most of us, if we're honest, deal with in our lives daily.
Yeah. And this is where, our hope as we go through this. I mean, Dad, we've talked about this, but driving home, like we've talked about, I mean, this is a real thing that we work through, the crowded soil or the busy soil. I mean, these are hit home. So, I mean, as we look at the first thing of, at least for me, Dad, what are the weeds and thorns in my life? I think of, okay, what are the things that are happening around me? The things that are not necessarily in me, but are happening around me. And the things that I struggle with that choke the life in me is the constant external evaluation.
Mm.
of my value and my worth.
Yeah. When I saw, when I hear that, I think performance driven identity for me, that recognition, getting that from the outside performance.
Well, think about it. I mean, if anyone who listens to this, and if you're being honest, I'm sure because we're in the same profession, most of us. I mean, most of these are going to hit home. I believe. I mean, for me, some of those external evaluations are, your job. What job do you have? I mean, what logo do you have on your chest? You know, you
Amen.
you always talk about, walking into a recruit and you come in. I mean, if you have an Alabama logo on, that means something, right?
It
Or,
sure does.
and if you have a school that they may never have seen, it doesn't carry as much weight. Well, at least those are the weeds and thorns that are going through your head that the enemy is using to tell you your value and your worth. The second thing, or status, or position. Maybe you're not in a position that you want to be in, and you're constantly thinking about, I want to be here, I want to have this control, or I want to have this role. And the problem with that is when you're constantly thinking about what you lack, you can't experience the kingdom or life because you're thinking about what you don't have instead of what you do have.
Mm.
Another thing is, market value, contracts or what you're getting paid. Think of it like if you read any social media, or not even social media, just media in general, and people look and, receivers want to be the market, the top of the market and what they make, or quarterback, or they want people to say you're the most valuable player or person, in our organization or in the league. And, obviously there are those one that we hear about, but think about all the people that don't get that,
No,
you
no
know,
doubt.
that don't get that money maybe at all. You know, you think about some of these coaches that, are making millions and millions of dollars. And then there's some that are making very, not nowhere close to that.
Well, that's
So,
why there's such a push too to get to the highest levels. That's why there's so much backstabbing and talking about people because there's generational security. If you can get one job at an Alabama or in a National Football League, you're set for life, and
yeah,
so are your children and your grandkids.
yeah. I mean, another one is just achievements and awards. What coach is getting these awards, or these players getting those awards, or who's getting, who won the Super Bowl or who won the national championship. I
Yeah, that
mean,
speaks right to your identity because coaches get Coach of the Year. All of a sudden, they think more highly of themselves. Yet, as we both know as coaches, the funny thing is that same coach that goes 0-10 and then maybe the next year gets Coach of the Year. No one really thinks about that, but same guy,
yeah,
probably running the same scheme. Probably just got a better player or two at a position, or something fell his way that given year.
yep, yep. Other things that I know I struggle with is, records or, statistics. I mean, these are all things that, flood our attention. You know, we're constantly looking at this, thinking about, oh, either I'm pleased with it or not pleased with it. Um, you know, and then there's also media, people's thoughts and their opinions. If you turn on the TV, I mean, you constantly are hearing, you know, he played well this week, or he played bad this week, or he's never going to recover. His career's over. He's a bust. Or, I mean, this is all value and worth.
You wonder, Austin, if that's what Jesus meant when he was talking to his disciples when he said, "Hey, I've given you a teachable heart." So what I take from that means everybody created has a teachable heart. And I think I think of that picture, I think it's Philippians, where, you talk about the clay and the potter, right? A teachable heart to me is one of those hearts that's moldable.
Yeah.
But what does he say? He said, those with a listening heart. So instead of hearing these voices that are around us,
Mm,
can we hear him and what he's saying to our heart? Can we listen to someone else's heart when they're communicating to us? I think that's what, that's that listening heart that's so critical. And you have to have that open heart to be able to do that.
absolutely. So, I mean, we talked about the weeds and the thorns that surround us, and now we go to kind of our thought lives. Anxious thoughts, Jesus talks about, life's worries. These are also things that choke us, from experiencing the kingdom and living out of the rest and the goodness and the riches that come with that kingdom. One of my, and I might have said it on one of these podcasts, but one of the stories that really hits home for me, Dad, is the story of Elijah. And me and my kids, we read a book called The God Contest, where Elijah goes and he defeats all the prophets of Baal, and basically God just shows that he's the true God, and then all the prophets of Baal are killed. Well, obviously that's a highlight. That's a moment. That's a victory for Elijah and obviously God. But the next few chapters in the Bible are very intriguing because it talks about in 1 Kings 19, 1 through 2, it talks about Elijah's afraid of Jezebel, who is the queen of the time. It's those anxious thoughts. So you just did this amazing thing and your God just protected and provided in an unbelievable situation. And then your anxious thoughts go to, I'm going to die. Someone's going to kill me. And you're sitting there, obviously, as the reader, you're saying, how could you go from here to here that quickly? But I know I do. I do, Dad. I mean, it's just these anxious thoughts of flood. I mean, the enemy, because of what Christ has done, we're victorious. We have the ability to be victorious. But what the enemy can do is take these lies, these things of deception, and get us distracted, crowded, busy. And I know for me, one of the things that just chokes my life or the kingdom lifestyle out of my life is anxious thoughts. You're afraid of what could happen. Um, yeah.
Well, I think of Peter, and you just said it about Elijah's situation, but I think of Peter. Heck, he's walking on the water.
That's a quick turnaround.
He's walking on the water coming to Jesus. And then all of a sudden he puts his eyes on the waves. We talk about the thorns and the weeds. Well, what about the waves in our life? And they come and they're going to come.
Just like the weeds of thorns, they're coming. It's not that we're not promised that those things are going to be removed.
No, and he takes his eye off for a moment and he starts to sink. And I think of 1 Peter 5:7, it says, pour out all your worries and stress upon him and leave them there, which I think that's the key. Leave them there to us, for he always tenderly cares for you. And I think we're going to see throughout our whole conversation, at the end of the day, and I'll mention this later, it really comes down to, do I really believe that he loves me and he's good? Because in the midst of these issues, which we're going to have, like you said, they're everyday cares of the world, do we believe that he's there with us?
Well, like I said, this one hits home for me. I mean, it's as I kind of meditated and thought through what are some of the anxious thoughts if I were to put them into words over my life and even in present time. I would say my biggest thing, one of the things that just steals life, is fear of failing.
Mm.
You know, um, you know, the question is, why do I fear it? If I'm being honest, as I dig into myself and just, the thoughts that, really go on in my heart and my mind, or, I'm afraid of conflict or how I will be treated if I fail. So instead of my response, learning how to work through that, my response is don't fail, then you don't have to be in that situation.
Mm.
Well, you can imagine the bondage that creates, and the life that gets taken, or the kingdom lifestyle that gets taken when you are afraid to make a mistake or to fail. Another one is just, yeah, I struggle. I'm afraid of defending myself. I've been, especially in the coaching and playing world, you're told no excuses.
Mm.
So if you give any excuse for why you can't perform, or why you can't execute, or do your job, if you give any reason, that's an excuse, and you don't do that. And I which is funny because, and this is a side note, it's kind of off the point, but it just kind of popped in my head, is like, it's funny, I give then, like when I'm coaching a player or something, I'll say, guys, excuses are real things. The sun is in your eyes, right? The rain is wet.
All right.
You are sick, you don't feel good. It's not ignoring the fact that they're there. It's about learning how to overcome and live in the midst of those things. And I think, part of my thing is I'm afraid of getting in situations where I feel like I'd have to defend myself, and, I'd rather say nothing at all because I don't, want to come across as giving an excuse.
Yeah, we stuff it. We stuff those things.
Oh, that's me. I mean, that's what led to my depression. Is, you know, I I do it until I can't hold it in anymore. And once again, what happens? That's that choking of life that we're talking about to this plant.
Mm. Yep.
And that's something I struggle with, Dad. I mean, and you've walked through with me through many of these times.
And part of what you're doing is what First Peter 5:7 says. You're pouring it out. When you're able to say, "This is where I'm at." This is why we encourage our coaches and our guests. Find an outlet. If it's not Win Awakening, find an outlet where you can say, "This is where I'm at."
Yeah.
Because if you stuff it, it's going to come out sometime.
Yeah, in a way you don't want it to come out, and it's usually unhealthy. I mean, for
Mm.
me, many a times. And then the last thing, Dad, as far as why I fear failing, is I'm afraid if I fail once, what if I can't fix it? What if I fail again? I've already did it once. It's one time, but what if I do it again? What if I can't make the correction? And once again, I mean, this is all thought live, or things that are happening in my thought life that are lies. I mean, what they're all about me and being in control. They're all about me doing the defending. It's me handling the conflict. It's me fixing.
Mm.
And the enemy is putting the onus on me, which is the thing that we were never created to live that way. The kingdom lifestyle. We put our hope and trust in the Father and in His Son and His Spirit. They're the ones that carry us. But we live our life stressed out or anxious because we try to do everything. We
Mm.
try to control things that are truly out of our control.
Well,
And
that's a good lead in. Good lead in to me.
go
Because
ahead.
when I was talking to Mom, and I was rattling off issues that I am working through, and I'd like to now call them opportunities, even so sometimes they're not fun. And as we looked at really my life, we both came up with, my fear that I work through is a loss of control. And I'm sure it's a product of since I've been a kid and the position I play and being a head coach. And, you have this false idea that you're in control, but it turns into a fear that I'm going to lose control. And how does that come out in day-to-day life? Well, I want life to work out. I want it to work out for you. I want it to work out for me. And once again, how do you define working out? It's like wanting good. Well, whose definition of good is the right one? Is it what I only view as good? Because maybe something that's in my life that I don't like, God says is good because it's going to help me be more like him. So wanting life to work out, that's an issue I struggle with all the time. And when it doesn't, I get mad because it's an interruption to my life. It makes maybe my life or my day uncomfortable. I think of family issues. You and I are at different stages of life. Obviously, you have the 4 little kiddos, and they have their own issues in themselves. Where I sit, I have adult children. And, many times I've said to mom, I said, man, I remember when we used to get upset because either one of our kids didn't get enough playing time or it didn't go right. And I sometimes say, boy, I wish I had those issues today, because the adult children issues are tougher. And then you really can't do anything about it. You want to be a voice and a sounding board. But once again, there's that control. I want my life of my kids to work out and to be good. And a lot of that, where I found it in my life, it caused me to be codependent. When things are going tough for you guys, it affects my day. And so I'm allowing your day to affect my day. And again, that's that fear of the control, the loss of control. I think about it even with Awakening here and coaching and the uncertainties of, is the ministry going to keep growing, or should I keep coaching as well? And how's it going to be provided financially? Well, all those issues I can't control. Yeah. And so that's really the struggle for me when I think of a fear. It's the fear of control. And once again, the answer, though, which there's got to be a solution, as you and I always talk about, or else we're just wasting our time with this whole faith thing. It's where do I believe God is in this? Yeah. Does God love me? Is he always good? We've been captivated by this love so that we can cast every one of these things onto him because we know he's the one that's there. So learning to walk in love and his authority and to be fully assured of his powerful presence daily in our life and his authority. That's, to me, the key is, do I really believe Papa loves me and is he always good?
Yeah. And kind of a side note, like just listening to that, Dad, it's like, back to, my fears of failing. If I sit back and I remember, I think I said this one other time, it's like, if I might not know where I'm going, whether it's a control thing or, how I'm going to be treated, or a conflict that I have to work through, or defending, or, something I got to fix. I might not know that uncertainty. But the beautiful thing is, as we grow in the kingdom, we begin to really know the heart of the Father. And so the uncertainty that that a lot of times causes me anxiety, if I fix my eyes on the things that I do know, and that's what you just said, Dad, is that God is good. He is present. He can work anything into the good for me and for making me into his likeness more and more each and every day. If I could keep my eyes fixed or focused on the thing that I do know, not the things that I don't know, I think this kingdom lifestyle starts to, it starts to flourish even in the midst of these weeds, these thorns, these things that are, when the enemy is coming at us. I think we're able to live it, not by ourselves, but transformationally. We've been transformed by what we're experiencing and what we begin to know and experience, know about our Father and who he is, and how he relates with us, and the authority that he carries in all situations. So for me, I think the answer or the solution is him, and
Yep.
knowing who he is in the midst of what I don't know. And it's accepting the fact that, like you said, Dad, we both struggle with control. It's first admitting that I'm not in control.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And so I think there's that hope, but I mean, it's a process. Growth is not always linear. It's you know, it takes a lot.
That's for sure. Let me interrupt you for a moment. I'm grateful for the opportunity that I have to do this podcast with my son, Austin. For the last 10 years, Austin and I have had many intimate conversations on his drive home from work. Some of these father-son conversations have been lighthearted, while others have been very deep and emotional. Over the Christmas holidays, we decided to start a podcast called Awaken Kingdom Culture, where we invite our friends to share their life-changing stories with you, our listeners. This podcast is done under our nonprofit, The Win Awakening, a sports ministry network for coaches, athletes, and those who lead. Our vision is to awaken hearts and minds, one story at a time. Our mission is to encourage coaches and athletes and those who lead to live from a place of victory, regardless of success, records, or the scoreboard. Our goal is to create safe environments where transparency and vulnerability are accepted, and value and worth are recognized in an atmosphere of love. Right in the middle of your mess, I'm reminded daily that the most important person of my day is the one in front of me, and that one matters, and that you are the one. WinAwakening.org is our website. I encourage you to visit our website where you can encounter the good news of who you are in Christ and what you already possess and how to live from it. There you'll find blogs, videos, Andrew's journal, and this podcast, Awaken Kingdom Culture, where hearts and minds come alive, one story at a time. I'm thankful for all of you who have given and are a member of Team Win. Awaken Kingdom Culture is listener supported. And if you'd like to support us, you can go to winawakening.org. We are a nonprofit. I encourage you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. And please like, share, and write a review on Spotify or YouTube. Okay, it's time to get back to the podcast.
Anyways, so that takes us to the next part that, Jesus kind of talks about in the parable, and it's life's busy distractions. These are things that can also choke our plant, or the ways of our being, or the kingdom lifestyle that is trying to take over our lives. And the Bible example that I thought of, Dad, was first Martha and Mary.
That's a great one.
Martha obviously is sitting there, doing a good thing, what the world would consider a good thing, being hospitable, taking care of their guests. But Jesus, talks to Martha and gets her to rethink what is more important, doing a good thing or sitting at my feet and listening and obeying and gleaning and taking from me. And once again, I'm not saying that there's not going to be times where we end up doing works such as that, because I think that the Spirit, when we are transformed, we end up just naturally living out of the source, and good works do happen, and sometimes it is through service. But in that moment, she had an opportunity to sit at the feet of Jesus and to listen and glean. And life's busy distractions took away from those few moments of opportunity, just like so many of our lives. We
I think
miss those
we all
opportunities.
struggle with, yeah, we all struggle with time, sitting there, patience, silence, alone.
It's inefficient.
It's not easy for us as humans.
No. But I think that's why God even put that in on the seventh day, right? Because
Hmm.
he knew that part of the kingdom, there is a time for rest for yourself to recharge and refocus. But we ignore those truths and we make them rules. Like, we focus on the Sabbath as being this thing that is what makes me righteous, instead of God put this in place for me to function at the way he designed us to
Yeah, our
function at our
health.
best. Yeah.
Hmm.
But even more than the Martha and Mary story, Dad, the one that really caught my attention was the Luke 14:15 through 24, which is another parable that I'm actually going to read just because I thought it was so powerful for me, Dad. And it's the parable of the parable of the great banquet. And this is what it says. It says, when one of those at the table with him heard this, he said to Jesus, "Blessed is one who will eat at the feast in the kingdom of God." Jesus replied, "A certain man was preparing a great banquet and invited many guests. At the time of the banquet, he sent his servants to tell those who had been invited, 'Come, for everyone is now ready. For everything is now ready.' But they all alike began to make excuses. The first said, 'I have just bought a field, and I must go and see it. Please excuse me.' Another said, 'I have just bought 5 yoke of oxen, and I'm on my way to try them out. Please excuse me.' Still another said, 'I just got married, so I can't come,' which are all legitimate excuses in the world that we live in. The servant came back and reported this to his master. Then the owner of the house became angry and ordered his servants, 'Go out and quickly into the streets and the alleys and the towns and bring in the poor, the crippled, the blind, and the lame,' which I think is important because they're in seasons of life that is a good soil ready to take in the kingdom that is being given to them.
Mm.
It says, 'Sir,' the servant said, 'what you ordered has been done, but there is still room.' Then the master told his servants, 'Go out to the roads and the country lanes and compel them to come in, so that my house will be full. I tell you, not one of those who were invited will get a taste of my banquet.'" And you just got to think about this. Even the word angry here, you got to think about the heart of the Father. I mean, he's giving his best. He's inviting you to this great banquet, and you rejected him. He's inviting us into this kingdom lifestyle to walk in that he knows is the best existence for us, just like this great banquet.
Hmm.
And yet I'm so convicted is the word I use, is because I can think of a zillion things in my life that I just say, "God, I don't have time to spend time with you because I got to get this done for tomorrow because we got to." And you just think of the Father just sitting there saying, I got the best thing for you. And, you know, I'll go, I'll go over here to someone who will take my invitation. And the invitation's for everyone now. That kingdom lifestyle is for everyone. We have that teachable heart, like you said, Dad, but not everyone has a listening heart because why? Because we're being choked.
You
We
know,
got
Austin, I think one of the things that people think, though, when you say that, I want to make sure we're clear. They think you're talking about salvation. The way I hear that in my spirit is he's giving us all the tools
mm,
to live this victorious life.
amen. That
And that's what
continues
we
on for
lose out.
eternity.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that have salvation and they're waiting for eternity. to think that's where they live it. But he's saying, here's the feast. The feast is right now. You can live this abundant, victorious life right now because I am in you and you are in me and we're in the Father. And that's to me what's so encouraging as a solution. But when I was thinking of this busy distractions, what came right to my mind, because it's relevant to me and you, and it's relevant to every football coach right now in season and whatever other sports when they're in season, is the whole thought of game week. Mm. I mean, I could call probably 9 or 10 coaches right now and not get them. Yeah. And not get a return call. And the response is going to be, it's, we're in the middle of the season, we're in game week. And for a coach, the whole thing of game planning, what does a day look like?
Well, Dad, what is your the thing that hung in our house? We interrupt this marriage for football season.
Exactly.
I mean, we even joke about this.
It was a gift.
Yeah, this life that, we all know. It takes a lot of time to do the job well. And these are things that we have to sit and process. I'm not sitting here saying I know the answer, because I called you the other day, Dad, just talking about what I'm working through and the struggles and trying to do a good job, but also understand that life is even more than this. But that's why we do this podcast, I think, is that if we never sit and ask these questions, we never dig deeper, like we talked about in the last time we did the podcast. And if we never dig deeper, I don't think there's ever that growth and change to whatever the Spirit is leading us to do or how to live.
Yeah, if we don't tend the garden's not going to grow properly.
Yeah. On top of just schedule and the amount of commitment that you have, there's just not a lot of free time. But then the free time that you have, and this is honest for me, is like you're exhausted. Like when I go home to my kids, who I love dearly, and they're gonna I'm gonna live with them for the remainder of my life on this earth. I can't. A lot of times I'm so exhausted, I can't give them what I just sat and gave a bunch of other kids all day. Here's another thing that I'm guilty of, is my mind has a hard time shutting off. There's a lot of unrest because I'm thinking about the next play, or if I could just do this versus this coverage, or how could I get this taught, or what drill can I get this, so that my kids can understand. And what you wake up and you're at the next day and you're doing it. And then, I want to stand out and be recognized. So there's this thing that gets preached in our world that I have to have an edge. And my edge a lot of times is do what other people don't do. Well, I know a lot of us struggle with this is, well, then I got to give more effort. I got to prepare more. And I don't necessarily know what everyone else is doing, so I just got to keep doing it. So there's that constant, it's never enough.
When you were saying those things, the thought that came to my mind, and I'm going to end with a statement that, because there is a solution, and that's the thing, we can have hope and we can be encouraged by. I think about when you talk about the schedule, to me, it was always about making personal priorities. That's where I was challenged. Okay, well, find that time slot to prioritize God. But as I grow in my faith and in my relationship and in all the different things I'm involved with, what I'm learning and my heart is being open to is to recognize that Jesus walked along the way. He didn't schedule meetings with people. As he walked along the way of life, he encountered the people of his day. And so for me, it's been, in the midst of busyness and different things that are required of us as coaches, because the statement we all want to make is, I don't have enough time. Well, the last time I checked, for all of us, we have 86,400 seconds a day. We can't take any with us tomorrow, and we can't add. And you talked about being exhausted. Remember in our study when we were putting together that booklet to raise funds, 40%, it says 40% of coaches are mentally exhausted, which obviously also makes you physically exhausted. You talked about a mind that's of unrest. I thought of James in chapter 1, where it talks about a divided heart, being double-minded. I know I find myself there at times, double-minded. And so as I really thought about it, I think the encouraging statement is that every day I'm learning that looking for Papa in the midst of relationships and distractions. In my day-to-day, just look for him in people, look for him in my distractions. You know, I told Mom this, Austin. I said, you know, did all this stuff go on when I was coaching? You know, as the head coach at Liberty, the head coach at East Central, when all the things that you all were going through being raised as young kids, I'm like, man, I didn't see any of that stuff. Or when you tell me things with your kids or Kelly with her kids, I said, was I that out of it? And Mom's like, you weren't around. Because now that I have more time and I'm around the house and I'm around the kids and I hear more things, I'm like, wow, did we go through all of that? And so I think the answer or the solution for life's busyness is seeing Christ, because he's in all, seeing Christ in all relationships and distractions. Whether I'm sitting, as I talked to one of my friends, Bubba, as I'm sitting there breaking down film, Christ is there because he's in everything. Or if I'm in a relationship with a player, he's there. If it's something with Mom and I, he's there. Me and you, he's there. And so having that listening heart to his presence and his voice in all relationships, in all distractions or interruptions.
Well, that brings us to the final thing that Jesus talks about that can choke our life or our plant is riches and pleasures. You know, the example I think of is actually when Jesus gets tempted in the desert in Matthew 4, 1 through 11. I mean, the enemy literally comes and tests him. He tests him on, hey, you've been fasting. I know you're hungry. Why don't you just turn this into food? You know, he says, you say you believe in God. Go on top of this church or whatever it was and jump off of it.
Precipice.
Yeah, and see if God takes care of you. Test him. You know, and then he finishes up and he says the third one. He's like, if you bow down to me, I'll give you everything. Everything will be yours, as if it wasn't already his anyway. You know, the promises of things that we would consider make us rich, that could give us pleasure. Food gives you pleasure, right? Protection, you know, and then the riches of everything around you. But, you know, these are things when we're constantly chasing and we live as if we don't have, then
that's the key.
Yep, when you live as if you don't have, you know, everything just tightens up in your life and you can't experience the kingdom. And that's the thing that breaks the Father's heart is he knows I'm giving it to you now, but he also knows the way is narrow. The way to experience it is very narrow, and it's through the life of Christ and the way that he lived life. He is the model. And we can't live if we live contradictorily to the way that he lived life. we might experience great things on this earth, but we're not going to be able to experience the kingdom because the way is narrow. There is a cost.
And he always lived out of the source, Father.
Mm. Yep.
He's our source, living out of him.
Yeah.
You know, I thought of Judas was a quick example of just how he got distracted, right?
Yeah.
He's right there, one of the 12, but he gave into his lust.
Yeah.
So he leads Jesus away to be betrayed.
Yeah.
We talked last time about the rich young ruler. And again, there's so much focus on the money, which could be attached. Some of the things I read could be attached to pride and accomplishments, which to me hits home more to me than the money piece. But what Jesus says to him is the kicker. Go sell everything.
That's hard to wrestle with.
Yeah. Then he says, then when you sell everything. So what is everything? You know, again, it's not just money. In that case, it might have been just money or possessions, but it's whatever you think's important to you, right? What are you holding on to that is
And Dad, I'm
something?
sorry for interrupting you, but it just, I think that's the point. I don't think it's like just some Band-Aid you could put over. Go sell your house. Go to a foreign country. I mean, I think it's different for everybody. To sell everything. God's talking about something very personal he knows about you. What is everything to you? And so for one person, it might look like this. And another person, it might look like this. Because he's so intimate and knows each of our hearts that he knows what that everything is in our lives that are keeping us from experiencing the kingdom.
Yep.
Sorry, Dad.
No. And then he says in 1 John chapter 2, 15 and 17, he says, don't set your affections of your heart. Again, he's talking about that heart. He goes back to the heart on this world or in loving the things of the world. The love of the Father and the love of the world are incompatible. For all that the world can offer us, the gratification of our flesh, the allurement of the things of the world, and the obsession with status and importance, none of these things come from the Father, but from the world. This world and its desires are in the process of passing away, but those who love to do the will of the Father live forever.
Wow, that's powerful. And this is the question I think that we need to ask, but I think everyone needs to ask is evaluate yourself. What is it that I really want? Because that's the stuff that shows up in your plant. I know a question that usually pops up when you're, as a coach is why not me? Right? When you want something and you don't get it, the question that pops up is why not me? Because I think it's pretty, and not that I know for sure, but I think it could be summed up for most people, even outside of the profession we're in, Dad, is we all want very similar things. We want to be recognized. We want to be seen, valued, deemed worthy, known, and accepted. Well, the truth is we are by the one whose opinion matters, the Creator, the one who knows me even better than the other people around me know. But the problem is we want those things based on what I can do, how I do it, how I perform. And we want to be the one that creates that good feeling instead of resting in the fact that his love is given, without something that I've done. And I don't know. I think we chase after the riches of the world, which are those things. And they could be spiritual things, not just of the world. But we do it in a way where it's about me living independently as opposed to depending on the source for those things.
I mean, one of the things I've walked through recently, really last year and then back again this year, was that whole opportunity with the ELF League and the European League. Head coaching opportunities and talking about that over and over. And when I really searched my heart, and Mom says, "Well, what is it? Why do you want to do it?" And I guess you could put it under the pleasures and riches category, because I wanted one more shot in my head. I didn't like the way my career ended. We were 0-9 our last year. And I wanted to go back, I guess, to the place that I experienced most success I had my whole career, was over in Europe with the Rhine Fire.
Yeah.
And so just working through that whole thing and looking at my heart and why I wanted to do certain things, and finally coming to, the grips that, no, that's not the right thing for me to do at this time. And but that was a challenge that's just basically hot off the press the last couple of weeks.
Yeah. Yeah. See, these burdens will choke our growth in the kingdom. And I know, Dad, you listed a handful of these. You want to go through some of those things that?
It's for all of us as coaches, right? It's climbing the coaching ladder. It's your coaching career record, whatever that might be. It's your performance. It's that transactional mindset that, it's all about my performance rather than the transactional, which again, in our ministry, we talk a lot about with coaches. I was on a call with 2 coaches this week, just continuing to remind them what growth is. Growth isn't just the scoreboard. Is it more fun to win? Are we going to try to win? Yes, of course. But when you don't win, there's still growth. Just, that dualistic thinking that occurs, that there's this either or mentality, when at the end of the day, it's all one. There is no dualism. The lack of busyness, contentment, those are all things that, stunt people's growth in this profession.
So I guess, the next question that gets brought up is, and I'm asking this to myself, how badly do you want the kingdom? Because like we said, there's going to be weeds. There's going to be thorns. There's going to be worries. There's going to be busyness. There's going to be burdens. Does the kingdom matter enough to you? That's the question that I ask myself. And once again, you got to understand, this is not like, this is growth, right? This is a process, okay? And this is something that you're continually asking yourself and searching your heart. And only God will lead you in the direction of what everything is. But these thorns and these weeds, they're there. These anxious thoughts, they're there. But they're meant to be cut out. I think of Matthew 18, 8 through 9. Let me pull it up real quick. It says, if your hand or your foot causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to enter into life maimed or crippled than to have 2 hands or 2 feet and be thrown into eternal fire. And if your eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out and throw it away. It is better for you to enter life with 1 eye than to have 2 eyes and be thrown into the fire of hell. And now I think what's important, okay? Once again, this is not just one clear-cut thing. And I think, but what Jesus is saying, that the most important thing is about life, which life is another word that I've always used. True life is what I've always used, but that's another word for the kingdom, right? Your goal should be to enter into the kingdom, to experience the kingdom, because if we truly trust the Father and we trust that He knows what's best for us, and his desire is for us to experience the kingdom. We need to be trying to experience that kingdom.
You know,
So
Austin, the thing that's, excuse me, that jumps out in my head though is, you know, there's a reason it's called the mystery of the kingdom.
yeah,
You know, the kingdom is within, and
yeah,
like we've said numerous times, we already have it. It's tapping into what we have. It's not an outside thing we're trying to go get.
yeah,
We have it. Christ is within, and
yeah.
the kingdom is something we can live from, and it's not something we have to go get.
Well, it's like even in that verses, Dad, thinking about what you just said, is like it doesn't say, you know, go get it. It's talking about cutting out things that are in your life that are choking or taking away
Mm.
from what you have. You know what I mean? And you know, this is hard because this is a commitment which us as coaches, you know, should have a firm understanding of what commitment looks like. You know, this is sacrifice. This is all in, like some would say, right?
Mm.
You know, um, if God is leading me in a direction to say this is keeping me from life, and hear what I'm not saying, or don't hear what I'm, because I'm not trying to say get out of coaching. What I'm saying is, you know, you got to listen to the spirit and see what are the everything in your the things that you're putting your hope and your trust in to find life. Those are the things that need to go, because you can't experience life if you have your faith in those things. I mean, what's the first commandment, Dad? And once again, we can make the commandments like this law, but it was really a thing of love, which said, listen, this is how you have life. This is how you experience the kingdom. Don't have any other gods before me. I mean, the
Mm.
first one. I mean, if you do, you can experience the kingdom. And out of love, he's telling you that. But we don't listen. We look at it as, you know, either we try to make it all these things, or we come up with, once again, excuses for, you know, why we can't go to that great banquet that he is throwing for us. And I think we got to sit, and each of us personally talk to Papa. Papa, what are these things that I need to gouge out? Or not even me. What are the things we together,
Yes.
what do we need to go on a journey to either refine, prune, or take out completely? But at the end of the day, I want that kingdom. Seek first the kingdom, and the rest will be added unto you. The problem is we say we want the kingdom, but we don't it don't really matter that much to us.
You know, you
But
made me think of the three words that are issues in living out of the kingdom when really they're there for our good, but is sacrifice,
yeah.
suffering, and surrender. Three words that are really critical as we walk out this journey with Papa.
I mean,
You
there's
know, then you
another.
look,
Yeah. I mean,
go
there was
ahead.
another verse, Dad, that, you know, stuck out to me was Luke 14:25 through 35, which is actually right after the great banquet. And the title that gets put in there is the cost of being a disciple. You know, what's a disciple? Someone who um, is so close to their teacher, their follower, that the dust of their feet falls onto you. And if you think about it, as I'm following Christ and his way of living and his trust and dependence on the Father, it starts to kick back onto me and begins to transform my own life. So it says the cost of being a disciple. Said the large crowds were traveling with Jesus, and turning to them, he said, "If anyone comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even their own life, such a person cannot be my disciple." Another way to say that, such a person can't experience the kingdom.
Mm.
And whoever does not carry their cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. Suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Won't you first sit down and estimate the cost to see if you have enough money to complete it? For if you lay the foundation and are not able to finish it, everyone who sees it will ridicule you, saying, "This person began to build and wasn't able to finish." Or suppose a king is about to go to war against another king. Won't he first sit down and consider whether he is able with 10,000 men to oppose the one coming against him with 20,000? If he is not able, he will send a delegation while the other is still a long way off and will ask for terms of peace. In the same way, those of you who do not give up everything you have cannot be my disciple. Salt is good, but if it loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is fit neither for the soil nor for the manure pile. It is thrown out. Whoever has ears, let them hear. And I think for me, what I take out of this is back to that sacrifice, Dad. I mean, we have to sit down and count the cost. If we truly want to experience the kingdom, one, it's going to look different than the world. I mean, that's just the truth. And then there's a process that we all are going to be walking through, which I'm currently walking through. You know, my whole life I'm walking through this thing with Papa, saying, God, what does this thing look like as I walk through this journey of, in this case, coaching, but also I want to experience the kingdom. Well, it might not be coaching for you. It might be something different, because everything in our lives are different. But this is a conversation that we have with our brothers and sisters, but ultimately it's one that we have with our Father. It's like, God, what does this look like to follow you?
Well said, Austin. I think as we close here, when we talked about the weeds and the thorns and being able to recognize, like we've talked before, about recognizing our flesh. We all have unique ways that our flesh, pops its ugly head out. And the enemies that we confront daily are the world, right, which wants us to compromise, our flesh, which wants to be recognized, and the devil, which makes things look attractive, and then he accuses, right?
Yeah.
My one friend, Steve McVeigh, calls it the unholy trinity. He says we're seeking power, prestige, and pleasure. And that's what robs us. Philippians 4:4-8, as we close, he says, don't be pulled in different directions or worried about a thing. Be saturated in prayer throughout each day, offering your faith-filled requests before God with overflowing gratitude. Tell him every detail of your life. Then God's wonderful peace that transcends human understanding will make the answers known to you through Christ. So keep your thoughts continually fixed on all that is authentic and real, honorable and admirable, beautiful and respectful, pure and holy, merciful and kind, and fasten your thoughts on every glorious work of God, praising him always. Follow the example of all that we have imparted to you, and the God of peace will be with you in all things. Once again, that is within. The treasure is within. And how we can live from the kingdom is by living in him as he walks his life with us day to day. And like you said, addressing those issues with him. Another great verse, which I won't read it tonight, but I recommend our listeners look at Hebrews 4, where he talks about the faith rest, because that's what this journey and this walk is. It's a rest in him. A couple books I thought I'd recommend to our listeners too is, if you're looking for a good book, it's actually a business book, but I think will challenge your thinking, is The Gap in the Gain. Instead of striving towards, it's not this pursuit of happiness, which we talked about tonight. A lot of these anxious cares, riches of the world, but it's being grateful for what we have and where we've come from. And the other book you and I have talked about before is Inside Out Coaching. Looking inside, because that's where the answer is. The kingdom is within. So as we've been pretty transparent with where we are in life and in our journey, the encouraging thing, I think, Austin, for both of us and our listeners, is that God is love and he loves us and he is always good. And he is there inside wanting us to seek him, the kingdom. So I appreciate our listeners joining us tonight on Awaken Kingdom Culture, where hearts and minds come alive, one story at a time.